Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. Well, today I wanted to get started on showing you how I make the patchwork skirt, kind of the frontier style one like I did in this video right up here. It takes me about 3 to 5 hours depending on how long, if it's a 4-tier or a 3-tier skirt. That's total time, start to finish, cutting the fabric and everything. So I work my skirts in 10-inch squares, and you can see here I have some fabric laid out. And this particular fabric right here is I picked up at a garage sale, and it was a tablecloth, and I just really liked the colors and the plaid. I thought was kind of neat. So what I'm doing is working off of that. I'm using this red, this lighter blue plaid, and I'm going to use another set of the plaid, and then the dark blue, and then the last color I'm going to use is this pale yellow that I think will go very nicely with that. So I already have the other colors cut out, so I figure I'll show you how I do this. Now when you're working with a good 100% cotton, it's super easy to cut out your squares. Now using the 10-inch squares, I have found, makes a pretty good one-size-fits-most type skirt. So what I start with is a 10-inch strip. So I'm going to cut this strip at the 10-inch mark, and then I'm just going to rip it straight. And that's what I was going to say, when you're using a good 100% cotton, that usually works the best for just being able to tear. It's very quick, it tears clean and straight. And then I usually fold the strip in half. So from there, I'm going to measure out another 10 inches, put a snip. Okay, there's 2 squares there. So I'm going to get 2 more out of this strip. So I need a total in this color of 7. I'm going to make a 3-tier skirt, so I'm going to need a total of 7 of each color, and then 14 of the plaid, of the tablecloth plaid, because I'm going to be using it twice. If you're making a 4-tier skirt, you're going to want, and say you have 6 different pieces of fabric, you're going to want 15 squares of each color. Okay, so I'm going to cut another snip, and I'm going to continue this. I think I need to get 2 more strips total. Well, no, 1 more should do it because I got 4. I only need 7. So 1 more strip, 10-inch strip. Okay, and I don't need that any more of that. So yeah, if you're using 6 different colors for the 3-tier skirt in a 10-inch square, you're going to need 7 squares of each color for it to come out right. And then if you're using, let's say, just like with the plaid, I'm using that plaid twice in the pattern, so I'm going to need 14 of each. And I've had skirts where I've used 2 of the you know, like a print and then a solid. So I needed 14 of each of those. So you can do this with as little as 3 different colors and have it come out nice. And I'll show you a picture of a 3-color skirt here. Or you can do a 4-color skirt like the one I'm going to show you right here. And here's a picture of a 5 fabric skirt right here. You can see I start right here. I have this laid out in a certain order. I'm going to pick 1 out of each and stack them on top of each other. And this is going to become my top tier. So there's that. There's the first 3, 4, 5, 6. So how this works is there's 6 squares in the top tier. Now I'm going to set that aside. Then on my 2nd tier, remember this is going to be the 3-tier skirt, I'm going to start 2 over, because I don't want to start with the same one that the other one started with. because otherwise I'm going to have too much of a repeating pattern all the way down. So the next tier is twice as long as the tier before it. It's going to be that way no matter how many tiers you do. So I'm going to need 12. So I'm starting from the third square over, and then I'm going to go all the way down. And this right here will be 6. And so I'm going to repeat that until I have 12, and then that's going to be my second tier. So I won't do all that right now. I'll do that in a minute. Then in the third tier, I'm going to start another 2 over, which means I'm going to start with this navy blue, and then I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to do that 4 times so that I have 24 squares in that one. And then if it's a 4 tier, what happens is I come back on the 4th tier and start with the very beginning color and do that until I have 48 squares total. That's the 4th tier. Now, if you're wanting, again, this is a pretty much one size fits most. So, but it goes up to about 55-inch hips. Now, if you need it to be a little bit bigger than that, simply make your top tier, make it in rectangles, because, you know, and if you're really tall, you may even want to make it in squares of 11 inches or 10.5 inches, just depending on how much more you want to add to that top. The rest of it can still stay 10-inch squares or 11-inch squares or whatever, however it is you want to do it. But the top can be rectangles, and I've done this before for people, just to give them a little bit more room on top, but then the rest will balance out the same. So I'm going to finish out making this second tier layer, and then I'm going to take you over the sewing machine and show you how I put them together. All right, I'm ready to start putting my squares together, and so I'm going to show you what I do. I'm going to go over a few things here. Now, I've already made sure that I have several bobbins wound up in the color that I'm going to use. I like to do that ahead of time because when you're making these skirts, you're going to go through a lot of bobbin thread. So have several of the right color ready to go just to make it easy and quicker for you. Now let me explain a little bit about this machine. This is not an electric machine. It never was an electric machine. It is not converted into a treadle. It was bought brand new. I bought it on Amazon, and I will link to this below. Best sewing machine I've ever owned. Genome treadle machine is what it is. It's purchased as that. Now, though I absolutely love the look of the antique treadle machines and would love to have one, the reason I went for a brand new one is because this gives me the zigzag stitch, the reverse, and all the things that I need. It even has other stitches that I never actually use because I'm straight stitch, zigzag, and that's pretty much it. So I just want to explain that to you. That's why I have this. I do have videos on the treadle machine. I'll probably link some in the end cards and probably some up here. I don't know which. It'll depend on when I go to put this up. But I also have videos on how to change the belt. To the right of me, I keep my pile of squares from top to bottom in the way that I'm going to sew them together. So I take my first square, then the second square, making sure my right sides are together. And then what I found best to do, since I don't like do anything special to the edges, like fold them over or anything like this, this is just the quickest way to do it, is I set my my stitch on a zigzag, just a slightly narrower, I don't do the full width, zigzag, and then I set the stitch close together, fairly tight. So on this machine it will be somewhere between the 3 and 2 setting on that, to get just a tighter stitch, and that way I know I'm going to get a fairly good hold. I start my square, I lock down my stitch, lock it down again at the end. Okay, and then open it up, move it down, do my next square. Again, making sure with each one, this is really important, is locking it down at the beginning. And this isn't sped up up right here. This is how fast I sew, locking it down on the end. And that also will show you that you don't have to go slow on a treadle machine. I always sew faster than that. I can get a skirt done in the same amount of time on a treadle machine as I could on an electric machine. I love the treadle. So I will, however, speed up the rest of this, putting this particular strip together. All right, so now I have the second tier put together, and this is the very end. This is the last piece I put on. So if you've seen the order that I was picking that up, this is the last piece. It was on the very bottom, and this here, this yellow end, is the very end piece of the top tier, the last piece I put on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the top tier down face up, down first, and then I'm going to take this long strip of the second tier and lay it face down on top of it. Okay, and so there's no exact science to this. You could be more precise about it if you want to, but I basically just eye it. So the way I lay it out is I have, for each proceeding tier, you're going to have 2 to 1 square. You're going to have 2 squares to 1 square of the tier before it. So what I want to do is get the center where these 2 squares meet and put it roughly in the center of the tier before it. And then I'm just going to take these pieces, or take this square here, and just try to bunch it up as evenly as I can. So I'm still using a good tight zigzag stitch, and I usually go a little, I definitely go a little slower on this because I got to bunch it as I go, and I want to check it and make sure, because sometimes every now and then my folds will pop out the other way, and then I have to take it apart and redo it. I found doing this way with the zigzag method, just the whole way down with a good tight stitch, is better than what I was doing before by using the straight stitch and then going over it again with a zigzag stitch. Just using a tighter zigzag stitch all the way down, I've noticed I've had less issues, and it just streamlines the whole thing, so I don't have as much sewing to do. Because the bunching part, this is one of the things, the making the ruffle, that's gonna be the part that takes, one of the things that takes the longest. That and doing the hem, especially on the 4-tier skirt, because you got to go around 48 squares. That's a lot. So I'll do a few more just in regular motion so you kind of see what I'm doing. A lot of times I try to even zigzag or do a reverse lockdown every time I get to a seam, just to make sure, and I didn't do it this time because I was talking. So I'll show you how I do that on this. It's just a little, you know, I like to make sure my skirts are going to be sturdy. So get to where a couple pieces meet, because that's going to be the places that might most likely want to come apart. And sometimes you might find you didn't quite bunch it as evenly, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect all the way around. In fact, to me it kind of detracts if every single fold is evenly spaced the whole way around perfect. To me it just looks too manufactured. So you lose that whole, there's the lockdown. You lose that whole handmade effect when you do it that way. So just my personal opinion, but if you're more of a perfectionist on that, you may want to measure it out and evenly fold your fabric, but it's going to take way more time. So I'm going to go ahead and finish putting this tier onto the top tier, and I'm going to speed this up. Okay, so that is that tier. And I'll show you real quick. Obviously, I'm going to show you the skirt when it's finished, and you should see a picture of it in the thumbnail. But you're going to have places, if you're using 3, 4, 5, or 6 different fabrics, where your fabrics are going to overlap. And when you see the first 2 tiers put together, it might not look too eye-appealing. However, usually the third tier is going to draw it all together. Now, you can use more fabric pieces like you would in a quilt, more different colors and prints, and be able to lay it out in such a way that you have no fabrics overlapping in themselves. So I was able to do that with a couple of the kids' skirts I made, so I'll show you pictures of those here. And you can see there's no overlap because I had a whole bunch of different fabrics to choose from, so it made it easier for me to arrange them. It does take a little bit more time, so I'll be back when I have the skirt all put together so we can finish that. I can finish up the rest on video. All right, now that I have all the tiers put together, all three of them, because I'm only doing the 3-tier, I'm going to keep the skirt inside out, or put it inside out, and bring the top edges, the top corners together, line those up, and then just make sure the edge, the outside edge of both of the whole skirt lines up nice and straight. And then I'm just going to throw a narrow but at least semi-tight zigzag stitch, locking down the beginning. Now I'm going to turn the skirt right side out. Now typically what I like to do is hem it next, and I'll go ahead and do that now. And when I do the hem, I set it on the widest zigzag. So I put in about a little less than a 1/2 inch hem, and you want to double it over, fold it twice, and I always start right on a section where the two pieces of fabric meet. Double it and reverse it. Now you can go around and you can iron this down, or you can add pins to it. That way you can just kind of keep going along as you're sewing. However, for me, I'd rather just fold it as I go. Alright, so the hem is done. And now I'm going to start on the waistband. Now the first step I'm going to do is really not super important. You can choose to iron and use pins. For me, I like to throw basically a basting stitch down, folding this over about close to a 1/2 inch, maybe about 1/3 inch over, right along the edge. I keep it as loose as possible, straight stitch this time. It's only straight stitch I use in the whole skirt. And then all the way around. Okay, now that that's done, I'm going to set this back on zigzag, on the widest zigzag. And what I like to do is I'll stand up and hold this up in front of the mirror so I can see what side I think would look best as the front. However, I think I can tell already. I try to get it so there's very little of the overlap on the front part. And I'm thinking the red in the front center is going to be the best. Okay, so the very next step I do, that's once you find out what part you want for your front center. Now this particular step is for if you're going to do a drawstring waist, which is what I'm going to do. I do a combination of a drawstring and elastic in the back. And I'll show you how I do that in a minute. So I'm going to fold it over. About 1 inch is what I use, because the elastic I use in the back is about 3/4 inch. So I want to make sure I have plenty of room to be able to pull that through. And then I fold it back one so it lines up right there. Grab my pen, and I'm going to draw about 1.5 inches to a 2-inch line straight right there where that lines up. So that just is to give me a line to work off of. And this is what I'm going to use for basically a buttonhole kind of design. And so I'm going to put my zigzag on at least a 1. I'm going to make it real tight, pretty much a satin stitch is what you're wanting to do. And I'm going to start, you can start anywhere on this you want. I'm going to start at this top corner over here. And I just want to get a good tight stitch going all the way across the top of that. Okay, I'm going to turn it. Do the short edge here. It's basically like one big buttonhole is what it is. And I'm going to go back. So then I've got this rectangle buttonhole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew another satin stitch right down the center, so I have two halves to that. What I'm going to do with these two holes, so I'm going to take my seam ripper and right in the middle at the angle, I'm going to rip some holes. So that's why you need a good tight satin stitch going around that, because your drawstring is going to go through this and you're not going to want it to fray. Now if your buttonhole ends up bunchy like this, once you have your drawstring in there and it's all bunched up, that's not even going to show. Now I'm going to do a wider, well, I've already had it on the wide zigzag, but a looser, so I'm setting it all the way on 4 instead of back on 1 where I had it for the buttonhole. And I'm just going to go all the way around at about, oh, let's see, it's about 1.25 inches, inch to 1.25 inches, all the way around on the waistband. Okay, so as far as the skirt part goes, the sewing on that is done. Now, the next thing I need to do is the drawstring. So, if you crochet, this is going to be an option for you. If you don't, then at least learn how to do the chain stitch, and I have a video that shows that, and I will go ahead and link to that right up here. That's the Crochet Series 101, and it shows you how to do the chain stitch. I'm going to use 3 strands. Every time I make a drawstring, I found 3 strands works better of just a worsted weight yarn. This is just your basic nylon red heart yarn. And I'm using an off-white, a navy blue, and a dark red. And I'm going to hold all 3 strands together at the same time. And I'm going to use a nice big hook. Now, though I prefer the bamboo hooks, when it comes to doing 2 or 3 strands at a time, the aluminum really does work better than the bamboo. But I will link to the bamboo hooks that I like a lot below. They're really inexpensive to buy a whole pack of them. And anyway, so I got to lock it on there or tie on. And then what I'm going to do is 100 chain stitches. I'm going to cut that off, and then I'm going to do another one just like that. So I'll kind of show you if you're new to it, so you can see how this works with the 3 strands. But if you don't know anything about crochet and you want to be able to do this, go check out that video in the upper corner. But you just hold all 3 and just crochet with all of them at the same time. Okay, so I want to do a total of 100 chains. All right, there's 100. You can see roughly how long this is. It's probably about 2.5 feet. It's not a yard. Okay, so I'm going to snip that off. Then I'm going to make another one just like that. Now I'm ready for the next step on the waist. I'm going to take my elastic. I usually use a piece about that long, which is what? It's not quite a foot, maybe 8 to 10 inches. I just eyeball it, cut off just a little extra. So this is going to go on the very back side. Now I'm going to take, you're going to find on your chain, there's one end that's fatter than the other. This is the fatter end. I'm going to take the end that feels flatter. I'm going to cut off these ends. On the other end though, make sure you leave those on there. And then I'm going to put it under the sewing machine here. Got my zigzag stitch. I'm going to set this a little tighter. And I'm just going to go over this again and again. Reverse and forward, reverse and forward. because I want to make sure that's going to hold, because there's going to be a lot of stress going on this. So good, go over it several times. Now you could do just a satin stitch and go over it just one time, but I rather go back and forth, so the stitches layer on top of each other. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the other end. Now you can choose to do an all drawstring way, so it's not necessary to add the elastic. It just gives it a little more comfort, a little more flex when you're moving. So you can still tie it tight. This is what helps make the skirts a little more one size fits all, because people can adjust it as needed and then still have that flex. If I'm not going to put the elastic in, I add an extra 10 stitches. So it's a total of, I just do one long chain, and it's a total of 210 chains with a K-size hook. Okay, so I'm just going to cut off a couple of, out of each color, a couple of pieces, set those aside. And typically I like to use a diaper pin. I'm not even sure if they still make diaper pins anymore, but I still have some from when my kids were little, back before we thought to make our own diapers with Velcro and snaps. So then I'm going to start in the one side. Doesn't matter which way you go first, just start on going through one of those holes, and the two hardest parts are getting the first part of the yarn through and then working the elastic through. I like the diaper pins because they're big and hefty and easy to guide. Okay, so there's the knot, and then you're just going to start threading it through, and then when I get up to the elastic, I'll show you what I do there to help get the elastic through that hole. Okay, so now the elastic is about ready to go through there. So what I'm going to do is, since the elastic is wider than the yarn is, I'm going to fold it in half and then kind of push it through there. Once you get the first part of the elastic through the opening, the rest will be pretty simple. It's just getting that elastic to go through there initially. There it goes. Okay, so now the rest should be fairly simple. And be careful as you're going along that the elastic does not twist. You're going to want to make sure it stays flat. Then the last thing I do before I wash it and trim all the threads off, and then I usually hand sew in a nice little tag if it's one that I'm selling, a little rain country tag. I'm going to take these pieces that I cut earlier, and I'm going to put that on the ends of my drawstring by pulling it through. I'll show the next one slower. If you know anything about how to make a tassel, that's what I'm doing, is I'm just making a tassel. And then I pull all the ends through that loop and pull it tight. Then, just as an extra security measure, I tie a knot. I'll show this a little bit slower. I put the hook in through this very end stitch. I grab all 3 pieces of yarn, or you can even just do 2 pieces. It doesn't have to be 3. It depends on how thick you want your tassel. And then I pull it through, so I've got a loop there. Pull it up big enough so you can stick your fingers through it. Is the easiest way to do it, or you can grab it with the hook. Reach through, grab all those end pieces and pull them through, and then pull it tight, and then tie your knot. That's how you make your own patchwork skirt.